President, this morning I had the opportunity to meet with some extraordinary young people. These are students from Parkland, Florida, who attended the school where the mass shooting took place 2 weeks ago. And what was amazingly impressive about these young people is that in the midst of their grief, in the midst of the unbelievably traumatic experience that they went through, seeing their best friends shot in cold blood or wounded, their teachers killed, they resolved not just to mourn and grieve their friends and neighbors, they resolved to stand up and fight back and come to Washington, go to Tallahassee, Florida, go around the country to do everything that they can to make certain that no more children, no more young people are mowed down and slaughtered in schools. Mr. President, nobody thinks that the issue of gun safety is going to be an easy issue to solve. There are literally hundreds of millions of guns throughout this country. There are 5 million assault weapons throughout this country today. And tragically, there are many thousands of people, I expect, in every state in this country who are walking our streets, who are at their wits' end emotionally, who are suicidal, and who are homicidal. And many of those people have access to guns and guns of mass destruction. Mr. President, I think that in some respects, the slaughter at the high school in Parkland, Florida, was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. Several months ago, the American people were stunned to see some very sick person in Las Vegas break a window and start mowing down people, killed some 58 Americans, wounded 500 people within a period of a few minutes. And that comes on top of Sandy Hook. It comes on top of so many gun slaughters that I think what has finally happened, maybe because of the extraordinary efforts of these young people from Parkland, where the American people are saying, enough is enough, that we have a difficult problem, and we may not be able to solve it completely overnight, but we have a moral obligation to do everything that we can to make certain that no more children, no more people in this country are mowed down by some sick person with a weapon. And that is not just me talking. It is not just the young people from the high school in Florida. It is pretty much what the American people want. And, Mr. President, let me refer you to a couple of polls that were conducted fairly recently. Quinnipiac poll was done on February 20th, just a few weeks ago. And this is what that poll showed. It showed that 97% of the American people support universal background checks. Not a radical idea. What the American people are saying, what gun owners are saying, is we should keep guns out of the hands of people who are not responsible and should not own guns. Universal background check almost universally supported by the American people. In that same Quinnipiac poll, 83% of the American people indicated support for a mandatory waiting period for all gun purchases. You don't want somebody who's angry, who's upset, who had something terrible happen, to go running into a gun store, buy a gun, and then go out using it. 75% basically want the Congress to address the issue of gun violence and to start taking action. 67% of the people polled by Quinnipiac support a nationwide ban on the sale of assault weapons. And they believe, and I believe, that assault weapons are designed as a military weapon to kill human beings. That is what those weapons are designed to do. And I believe, and have believed for 30 years, and a majority of the American people believe, that we should end the sale and distribution of those weapons. That was a Quinnipiac poll. A CNN poll done more recently, just a few days ago, February 25th. 70% of the American people want stricter gun laws, and this is the highest number that CNN has registered way back since the Brady Bill was passed in 1993. According to CNN, 87% support laws to prevent convicted felons and the mentally ill from owning guns. 71% support banning anyone under 21 from buying a gun. 63% support a ban on the sale and possession of high-capacity magazines. 57% support an assault weapons ban. 56% say that stricter gun laws would reduce gun-related deaths. So, Mr. President, we have a difficult issue which is not going to be solved overnight. Nobody thinks that it will. But the American people are demanding that we have the courage to stand up to the NRA and finally take some action which will move us in the right direction. And let me just suggest some of the ways that I believe we should go forward in a bipartisan way. Once again, the American people believe, I believe, universal background checks. And that means, among other things, ending the so-called gun show loophole. Because background checks don't mean anything if somebody can go into a gun show or through the internet and buy weapons without undergoing any background check. Overwhelmingly, the American people say that before somebody is able to purchase a gun, we need to know, is that person a killer? Is that a person who is engaged in domestic violence? Is that somebody who has a history of mental health problems? And if that is the case, that person should not be buying a gun. I think serious gun safety legislation must include addressing the so-called strawman purchases. And this is a provision where people can legally go into a gun shop, buy the weapons that they want, but then they're going to sell those weapons or distribute those weapons to people who should not be owning those weapons and who could not have purchased those weapons on their own. So I've indicated it is my view that we should ban assault weapons in this country, weapons which are designed for no other purpose but to kill human beings. Furthermore, I think it is clear that we are a nation which is facing a mental health crisis. I know that in my office, and I expect that in the offices of other senators, we get calls all of the time from people who say, I'm worried about my husband, I'm worried about my brother. He's at his wit's end. I don't know what he's going to do to himself or what he's going to do to somebody else. And we have been searching for mental health treatment, but we cannot find anything that is available now or that we can afford. And I believe we should be moving forward to pass legislation which says that any American who is suffering today from a mental health crisis should be able to get the mental health care they need now, not 2 months from now, because 2 months from now may be too late. And Mr. President, we also need to address the fact that every year women are being killed by their husbands or their boyfriends and that if somebody is a stalker, if somebody is convicted of domestic violence, if somebody is under a restraining order, we should be clear that that person should not be owning a gun. And that this is just some of what I think needs to be done. But, Mr. President, we are at a moment when the American people have had it up to here. They do not want to turn on their TV tomorrow or next week or next month and see the horrible, horrible, unspeakable things that we have seen in schools throughout this country. So at this particular moment in history, I hope that in a bipartisan way, we can come together, do what the American people want us to do, and that is to pass common sense gun safety legislation that is supported by the overwhelming majority of the American people. Thank you very much, and with that I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.